we go. So yeah, welcome to Matt from the Carbon Co-op. And Matt, we're going to ask you to talk to us about the potential for renewable energy at Barnhay Farm for establishing Kindling Farm. Matt, over to you.
Thanks very much, Helen. So my name's Matt Fawcett. I'm one of the co-founders of Carbon Co-op, which is an energy services cooperative in Greater Manchester, and we exist basically to help our members to make radical reductions in their carbon emissions. And it's really nice to be invited along today because Helen was very involved in some of the initial workshops that we did with Carbon Co-op back in the early days. And I've had a long-standing relationship with Kindling myself, so I couldn't, we couldn't be more delighted, essentially, that the farm that's so long been dreamed of is now a reality. So, I head up the energy systems team at Carbon Co-op. So I'm going to give you a quick presentation on some of the things to consider when you're looking at renewable, installing renewable energy on site. So hopefully this all works. Does everyone see that? Okay, excellent. So so this is a very is not the proposed vision of of everything being absolutely covered in solar, but we will go into the reasons for that as we go through. So just to basically talk about what I'll be covering and what I won't be covering. So really this is about what we need to consider when we're looking at solar PV on Kindling Farm or on a similar site. So I won't be talking about other renewable energy options while they may be there. It's not something that wants to be the sort of first topic of discussion with the local community that the farm is a part of, really. So the installation of a large wind turbine. So so we'll touch a little bit on the potential future energy demand. It's quite difficult to do a sort of assessment for Kindling Farm in a way because the usage currently and the historic usage are really very different from what's envisaged for the future. So so we'll try and look a little bit at that. I won't be talking too much about the future energy demand in terms of the house or in terms of future accommodation options, because Bill is going to do an excellent job of giving a retrofit seminar later on in this series. So all the information that I'm sharing here is in the public domain, and the tools that are referenced are freely available. So I will make these slides available to Helen afterwards, should she like to distribute them. This is really something to be a sort of a resource for you all out there and thinking about your own about potentially installations within your own houses or farms. So a quick caveat, so I'm not a solar installer, so these are topics to bear in mind. These are not build instructions for Kindling Farm, and most of my expertise is within the domestic sector. But there are lots of elements of that which will relate to a larger project. So just to give, I'm going to try not to be overly technical, and we won't go into lots of the sort of technical areas here. But just because I know that I'm likely to mention some of these things, I just thought I'd say what it is that we're talking about now, so that if I do fall into that trap, then you'll at least know what I'm talking about. So when we talk about watts or kilowatts, we're talking about power, as opposed to energy, which is when we talk about kilowatt hours. So that's the amount of power over a given period of time. So when we're looking at solar installations, usually we talk about having a 4 kilowatt array, or some similar figure, and that's a watts peak. So that's the maximum power that that installation is likely to use in factory conditions, which we are not necessarily in the Merseyside area. And in terms of efficiency, generally that's how much of the sun's power is converted to electricity. So there are some great advances being made here. So you've got units within universities that are reaching sort of almost 50% of sun's power converted to electricity. Within a conventional rooftop solar, you're probably looking about 20%, something like that, that will be converted. When we look at capacity factor, that's the amount of the rated power, so the watts peak that will be generated over a period of time. So that's recognizing that it isn't always light, and when it's light, it isn't always sunny. So in terms of how we would go about thinking about solar design, essentially the starting point for that should be looking at the wider building and its occupants. So because the most effective way to make use of solar power is to use it yourself. That's really what we want to be trying to maximize. So how do we maximize the amount of power that we produce locally? So obviously there is battery storage, which we can talk about later. There are obviously some environmental considerations with to be taken into account, and also cost considerations when purchasing batteries. Immersion tanks are a great storage of excess solar power. So you can think of them as being a sort of low impact battery, if you will. And also to look at what other large draws there are on site. So that might be a solar car or a solar tractor, or it could be a heat pump, which I think, as Kindling Farm is off gas grid, probably makes economic as well as environmental sense as a heating solution. And the interesting thing about these loads is that we can shift around the demand on them, really, to try and match when we've got free power from the sun. So, as I say, power usage at Kindling Farm is a difficult thing to you might well bite your nails. Hello, my God. Yeah, so it's a difficult thing to work out at present. There is some work to be done on the demand side as part of the sort of refurbishment project. So there's been a large change in terms of it's difficult to work it out on past usage because the occupancy has been variable, but also because there were very significant plans to change things quite dramatically. So, but currently, the suggestion for the energy bills there is £276 a month, which I think suggests to me that that perhaps you've been cold over the last few weeks. But anyway, there we go. We'll see. So in terms of solar, there has been an increase in costs of solar installation as a result of the sort of energy shock that the UK and indeed the world is currently experiencing. It's worth saying that these are the latest sort of government figures that are available from installations that have been done by MCS registered installers, but anecdotally, knowing people who have more recently had solar installed, it does look like these prices are starting to reduce again. So the suggestion being that we might be potentially over that peak, and we should see solar continuing to fall as it has done for the last sort of 20 years, really. something worth saying here is that you'll notice quite a significant difference between the larger installations and the smaller ones. Again, it makes sense here to try and maximize the size of your installation, really. There are some links here to how to understand solar costs and payback, which is extremely difficult at the moment, really, because energy prices, as we know, are fluctuating quite dramatically, and also installation costs have been fluctuating quite dramatically, with installers last year often giving quotes that were, valid for 7 days based on what they could, buy on the market at the time. So, but yeah, hopefully calm is coming. So essentially, I think the important thing to say about payback is that this is a bit like hedging, really, which is not something that normal people normally get a chance to be involved in. So it's an opportunity to buy your power now for the next 25 plus years. So there is an element of rolling the dice there. So if you bought your solar panels in early even early 2001, but certainly in 2000, then the payback periods that were suggested on your quote would have been dramatically slashed, and you would probably pay it off in a half or even a third of that time, due to the huge increase that we've seen in energy bills. So yeah, just to say this, this graph, if this looks confusing, is how much energy companies were buying energy for in 2001 at the dates on the bottom axis for 2022. So it's so this is what you're buying ahead. So this is what energy companies do all the time, and this is an opportunity for us to sort of do the same, really. So I think we've seen really quite dramatic changes in the economics of solar energy over the last couple of years. So it used to be that you would sit with your calculator and you'd put in 14 pence per kilowatt that you were going to be paying, and probably 4 or 5 pence that you might get back from energy exported to the grid. And those were pretty sort of static standard figures, and we would look at south-facing roofs that could generate the most energy possible, really. So this sort of peak period red zone here, due south, 30-degree tilt, absolutely perfect. But really, it's important to look at what difference it really makes if you've got an east-west facing roof. So the interesting thing really with an east-west facing roof is that you've got twice as much roof space. So, and you're also generating power at times when you might be using it more. So I'm going to respond to that, to Helen's slightly confused looking face about why you've got double the roof space, which is, so when you look at a roof which is pitched north to south, you're going to put panels on the south side, but there's no point in putting panels on the north side. Whereas if you've got an east-west facing roof, you can put panels on both sides and get energy earlier in the day when you're likely to be using it, and when the grid is likely to need it, importantly also, and also later into the evening, when again, not only are you more likely to be using it, but the price that the grid will pay you for your excess exported energy is potentially much greater. So yeah, I think east-west could be the way forward, and also solar panels themselves are making are a sort of ever decreasing percentage of your overall system costs. So while things like scaffolding might be increasing dramatically, or the price of steel for mountings and all this kind of stuff, the price of solar has been steadily increasing. So what we tend to recommend is that people oversize their solar arrays, so potentially significantly, which means that if you've got a cap in terms of what you're able to export to the grid, obviously you'll need to have an inverter, which or at least some sort of limiter on that potential export. But as you'll see in this graph, hopefully it makes sense. If you've got a larger array, while you're going to lose this little hairdo on the top here, particularly during sort of midday on a summer's day. But what you'll gain is power earlier and power later, and significantly power in the winter. Which, if you're going to have something like if you are considering a heat pump, then potentially that's something which again could be even more valuable. So in general, when you're looking at price per panel, once you're looking at standard roof standard roof mounted grid solar panels, you tend to pay more for the higher wattage versions, and that's because, as wattage increases over time, that's essentially the latest model. So it can make sense to doing a little survey today. It was significantly cheaper to buy a particular brand of panels rated at 400 watts rather than the ones that are rated at 430 watts. So that's a thing to bear in mind. And also the size of your overall array. The larger the array, generally the lower the costs. So, I should say as well that we're also we're going to talk about solar on the buildings at Kindling Farm here. We're not talking about converting any of the actual farm fields into a solar farm, for reasons that I think will be obvious to everyone on this call, because we need the food. So again, in terms of this tilt, it's if you've got a sort of a steeper pitch on your roof, then you'll be getting a better output in the winter than if you've got a shallower pitch, but a worse one in the summer. So I'll go through in a little bit later some of the tools you can use to sort of plot this over time and give you some sort of certainty really over what you're likely to produce. So again, in terms of orientation, you don't have to have a south-facing roof. You could have an east-facing wall. Just a quick mention on shading, that while there have been improvements in terms of this problem, but in general, it's worth saying that if you've got 10% shading, you're going to lose more than 10% of your power. So a way to think about this is it's a bit like having a dud battery among a set of live batteries, really. So it's something that we will that we try and avoid, or at least to minimize. So another concern is the grid. So we all want to be good grid actors, or we should do. So we had a little look here on SP Energy are the people who have the grid where the farm is. We don't at Carbon Co-op have much of a history of working with SP Energy. We work very closely with Electricity Northwest, but I'm sure that the folks there are just as lovely as they are at ENW. So you see here, there's a little blue tab in the center of this map, and that's Kindling Farm. So what you're seeing here is the is the sort of main grid infrastructure. So all of the substations and these sort of high voltage lines. You'll see that the Kindling Farm is not on any of the big sort of motorway or even major road routes. So there may be some. It might mean that it's therefore unlikely that Kindling Farm, were Kindling Farm want to become a solar farm, for example, then it wouldn't be in the best place for that. But fortunately, it doesn't want to do that. So if we just zoom in a little bit, then we get this view, and it's the thing to say here is maybe I'll just go back to this previous one. What you're seeing here is a lot of red. And what this means is that is not that you can't add new generation resources to the network, but that it's not a given, essentially. So that there are likely network reinforcement charges that are going to need to be paid by someone if you're going to add new generation resources onto that network. What you also see here is all of these blue areas, and those are all areas where there are currently flexibility tenders happening. So what that means is that the areas where there is significant grid congestion, and the DNO is paying companies or aggregators to try and shape the demand within those areas, and they will pay them for that service. So a bit like some of you on the call may have taken part in the grid flexibility trials this winter, which is where you were being told usually a day ahead. So tomorrow between 5 and 6, if you could turn things off, then it will help us to maintain the security of the grid. And people were paid this winter pretty handsomely for that, really. So people were in some of those trials, people were being paid £4 or £5 for every kilowatt hour that they were able to shift. So this is so if you're looking at that like 5 to 6 p.m. window, so as we go into that evening peak, when everyone comes home from work and starts cooking their dinner, then if you can shift that power to an hour earlier, then you're paid for that service, really. So any change to your general baseline usage, you're paid for, and that's going to become an increasing feature. So that's at a national level. This is at a local level. So but it's essentially trying to solve the same problem, that we essentially don't have enough power on the grid to deal with the demand which is currently there. So on to the better news. Drilling down, we see that it's not all fully red, and in fact the branch line, as it were, that Kindling Farm is on an amber line, which means, and I quote, at least one factor is nearing its operational limit, and hence, depending on the nature of the application, network reinforcement may be required. However, this can only be confirmed by detailed network analysis. So that's opposed to the green, which is like, yes, everything looks fine. There is significant capacity on the network, and we would welcome generation. Or red, which is, this is looking unlikely or will come with significant or potentially significant costs to someone, and in many cases that will be the person who is making the application to add new generation. So it's really worth starting that conversation with the network operator as soon as possible in the process, really. So to understand what the actual grid constraints might be in your area, which will depend very much on the sort of level of generation that you're wanting to install. And it's also worth mentioning that, you know, you also have a notification requirement should you be installing high load systems as well. So things like electric vehicles or heat pumps. And we know that that doesn't happen in all cases, which causes significant problems for the grid. And again, this is one of the areas where there's a bit of a disjoin in that applications and notifications are normally done by the installer, but it remains your legal responsibility as the property owner to ensure that that's being done. So it's currently a bit of a manual process. There is an attempt at the moment. I just went to an Ofgem webinar the other day talking about how it's all going to be super whiz bang and really rapid in the near future. So yeah, it's currently under a process of change and should be greatly improved. So in terms of planning, what do you need to think about? So if your property is in a conservation area or a World Heritage Site, which as far as I'm aware, Kindling Farm isn't, although that may be visited upon you at a future date. And that's both for domestic and commercial. So if you are in any of those things and you front onto a highway, then you need planning permission. Even in those cases, an installation on the rear of your property is still permitted development. So we should be, from the point of view of planning, we should generally work on the assumption, and even having worked in areas, beautiful bits of the Lake District, which are World Heritage Sites. In general, they say that the default assumption should be a yes, really, unless it's a building of particular local significance, and so long as it's done in a way which is respectful of those considerations. So tariff options, and this is a little bit the reason why I was talking about why east and west might make at least as much sense, if not more sense, than a due south facing roof. So this is an agile tariff for the last 7 days. I've noticed it's for the East Midlands and not the Cheshire and North Wales, but anyway, it's yeah, you won't see significant differences, I don't think, between those two graphs. But something interesting about this is that it's no longer really about how much energy you're using, or really necessarily how much energy you're generating. It's more about when you're using it and when you're generating it. So if we were to look at this map over a longer period of time, you would see that the energy price actually on occasion goes into the negative. So which are cases where you're actually being paid to use energy, because the most responsible thing you can do from a grid point of view is to use more energy because there is too much on the grid. And this is really important to understand if we want to see, which I'm sure we will do, more and more renewables on the grid. So we're saying as well that that there have been significant changes in the amount that you're paid for exporting your energy. So, I mean, disgracefully, with a lot of suppliers, there actually hasn't been any change, which is outrageous. So I would suggest for anyone who's still earning 3 or 4 pence for every kilowatt they export and 35 for everyone they import, that they should change supplier. But looking at something like the Octopus Agile the Octopus outgoing fixed rate, they now pay 15 pence a kilowatt hour, regardless of when that's exported. But in certain instances, you can make significantly more on outgoing agile. So I think, again, this is something that we're going to see a lot of change in. Do definitely go and check some of these things out before you leap onto a new tariff. But yeah, just a fun fact really, that the most that Octopus Agile has ever paid for a kilowatt of energy exported is £2.38, so which they paid in September 2001. So that's very significantly more than the 4 pence you might be getting with a fixed tariff, and also a great deal more than you're paying to buy that energy back from the grid. So, and yeah, just I will add it as a link in the presentation, but but these graphs are all from Energy Stats UK, which is a site run by a Carbon Coop member in Sheffield called Mick Wall, who just does all of these things does many incredible things as a volunteer really. So so yeah, great to see and fantastic resources, so I do recommend you check them out. So, and just a word on the importance of data and interoperability, just because I'm a geeky type and it would be remiss of me not to mention the importance of data. But it's important to think about this when you're thinking about your solar installation, because if you do have something like a heat pump or an electric vehicle, then how is that heat pump or electric vehicle going to know that now is a good time for it to start charging, or to run a Legionnaire cycle on your hot water tank? It will only know it if it knows what your solar power is currently producing, and if it knows what you're currently using in the rest of your property really. So so because of that, it's important that we look at systems that can interoperate together really. So systems that can communicate. And what we see a lot of is sort of quite siloed systems really, where it all works really great if everything that you've got is provided by Tesla or My Energy. And what we tend to advocate at Carbon Coop is for open standards and open APIs, so that different bits of kit from different manufacturers can all communicate together, so you can get the thing that's most appropriate for you without needing to compromise or be bound to a particular supplier, because it is, after all, your data. So a quick sort of recommendation really of a potential tool that I will just give a quick sort of overview of now. So so this is Easy PV, which is actually a much more professional tool than it sounds from that title. It's a free tool, and it's a really good one for doing some sort of initial scoping really on PV potential. So this is Kindling Farm here, and obviously the roofs that it sort of proposes as the most viable roofs are these large ones on the various barns, and I think it's fair to say that that many of these roofs, as it stands, won't support solar panels, and obviously this is something that needs to be that Kindling will need to bear in mind as part of the refurb process. Is there will be a structural engineer involved at some point, and these roofs will need sort of reviewing really. So, but all these roof spaces have got sort of 10 kilowatt hour installations plus. So which is very significant in terms of the of potential production on site really. So I think all in all you're looking at I think if you include the house, like 60 kilowatts of potential. which is great. I think you probably wouldn't get permission to add all of that to the grid. As it stands, you've got some tree issues. As an environmentalist, I hate to talk about tree issues, but they do get in the way of your solar panels a bit sometimes. But again, this tool is really good at being able to plot out all of these elements. And something which is interesting at Kindling Farm is that even if you're not able to get, even if the grid connection that you're able to get is only limiting you to like a 16 amp standard export, and you can't get more than that, you do have 3-phase at Kindling, which means that rather than the normal sort of 3.6, you would have just in excess of 10 kilowatt hours. And obviously there were other options there to increase that limit in discussions with the DNO, and I think you're probably in a very good case being a community-based social enterprise and all of this kind of stuff. So I'm going to stop sharing that, but we'll show you if that's okay. Let's see if this works. Okay, so this is EasyPV. So if we just go to here, this is the bit of the tool that I find particularly useful. So you'll see here, this is, let me just zoom out a little bit. So this is the house where Helen is at the moment, and these are the sort of various barns, and you'll see that these are the trees that are sort of mapped on there. So this is something where each of these buildings, you can put in the actual height that they are, put in the height and of the trees, which you can see actually very, very nicely on the sort of aerial photos. And it's, if I just go stop this and we look at it in winter, then you'll see that some of these areas, so this is all stuff that you could obviously do through observation and living at a place, but if you're quite new, then this is a good sort of shortcut really. So we see, if we go down to winter here, oh, look at that, we all remember that, don't we? Awful. Looking at sort of end of November, you'll see with the much longer shadows that we're getting these panels, for example, start looking a lot less viable. These ones perhaps back here start making more sense. But just nice to be able to sort of play with some of these things and see what the implications are for different times of the year. And each of these, obviously bear in mind that trees do grow, but you can put on the height of each of the trees, which really helps. Anyway, I'll stop doing that before, and you can do it in the rain. I don't know why really, but anyway, there you go. So I think I will stop rabbiting on and open it up for people's thoughts and questions.
Matt, that was great. Thank you very much. I definitely want to play on that tool. That looks great. So we've got first hand up that I've seen from Lucy. Are you happy to speak, Lucy?
Hi, it's not me, it's Javid, but
Hi, thanks a lot for amazing presentation. I want to ask, would it be an option to consider ground-mounted solar panels then, because especially if the roofs are fragile, either it would add cost to refurbish it, or it wouldn't be future-proof to put solar panels on top of it. In the future, it will cause extra problems. And ground source would be cheaper to install and repair and maintenance. You can wash it every now and then and clear it, I don't know. And if there is a problem, it will be cheaper to solve. And if you don't have space restrictions, if you can find, I don't know, roof size space to compromise for solar panels?
So yeah, just to, so I think it is, yeah, it's very possible to do ground-mounted solar. I think we would tend to say when you've got that much roof space, it seems a shame to use, you know, land that you could be using for other purposes, really. And obviously things like, you know, trees and hedges and all those kind of things, of which there are many, all become more of a concern when you're ground mounted. I'd say also it looks likely that well, yeah, I hope Helen won't mind me saying this, but I think quite a few of those roofs are going to need to be replaced in their entirety, really. And if you are going down that route, then replacing them with inbuilt solar panels rather than replacing the roof and then installing solar panels can be, you know, a cheaper way to go. So certainly lots of discussion around, you know, if you're replacing like a slate roof, for example, that it's cheaper to put solar panels as the covering on your roof than it is to install slate, even without solar. So so I think, yeah, there were lots of options, and I think certainly lots of the things you say about ground mounted make a lot of sense, and that's why most solar farms are ground mounted. But it just seems like a lot of you know, a shame not to use all those beautiful big roofs.
Thanks a lot.
Brilliant. We've got Ben and then Neil. Ben first.
So I don't know if my camera is working. It's just giving me some message about something, so I'll forget that. It sounds like the kilowatt hours export price varies quite significantly. Now we're running a farm which will have quite considerable power demands sometimes and quite negligible at others, I expect. Is there anything we can do, such as pumping water up to storage tanks, warming up storage tanks, immersion heater, but on a larger scale, to model and play that game back and try and beat the energy companies? Given this is not a domestic scale installation, we're doing something much bigger. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, that sounds brilliant to me, Ben. I think yeah, like pump storage is definitely out of my you know, anything I would claim to have any expertise in, really. But yeah, certainly storing energy as hot water makes lots of sense. And I think there'll be some really interesting things that you could explore as part of the farm project.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry not to give a more complete answer, Ben, but yeah, good.
That's
good
all right.
point.
I'm sure that between your network and the rest of us, we can find people who can support.
Absolutely.
Neil?
Yeah. Is there money within the share offer going to be dedicated to this?
Question for Helen, I think.
It's so in the share
Within the shareholder, the amount you're raising, is there going to be money set aside for something like this?
No, all of the community share, all of the money raised through community shares is going for purchase. So it's all for purchasing the farm. And one of the reasons for that is that it means that it's basically it's more secure because we already own the farm. So the investment is much more secure, but there is the possibility of doing either future community share raises. And one of the questions also that I have for Matt was about sort of grants, if there are grants available or other financing options available as well. But yeah, it could be something that we could, if the members wanted to, launch a share offer for in the future.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask a quick follow-on question there from Neil's excellent question? I presume that many of the electricity companies are supporting with grants for this sort of thing. What sort of support could we anticipate?
I'm not currently aware of any grants to support to support the installation of solar PV. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't support available from the DNOs, for example, for community-based installations and initiatives. So I can't speak for SP Energy, but I know both Northern Power Grid and ENW, and so it probably is applying to across the board, have community pots, which generally supports community energy organizations, but would definitely bear investigation from Kindling.
Great, thanks, Matt. There is a question in the chat, which is, what about energy storage, battery storage, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think battery storage starts to make more and more sense when you get to a larger scale, and particularly, as Ben mentioned, where you've got sorry, Anne, DNOs are district network operators. So they're the people who own the wires that transmit the energy around the place. If you're in Greater Manchester, that's Electricity North West. Where Kindling Farm is, that's SP Energy. So they're the people really with the responsibility for keeping the lights on. It's the people you buy your energy off are just sharks largely, but anyway, that's another story. So yes, sorry, battery storage. Yeah, it makes lots of sense, particularly when you're looking at sort of larger scale options. So it's definitely something worth putting into the mix, especially if you're looking at as we've seen, that sort of variable the variable price of energy coming in and also going out, because what a battery means is that you can not only charge it when you've got lots of solar, but you can also charge it particularly when there's something like the negative energy prices that I mentioned earlier on. So you can make the most of pulling in that energy, then helping the grid, then and then exporting it at a point when it's at its most valuable, which is generally the evening peak, and particularly the winter evening peak. And obviously, where we are, we don't get a lot of sunshine at 6 p.m. in the winter.
Okay, I've got 3 hands up. I'm going to take a question from Rob first, and then Ben. I'm not sure, Neil, if you've got another question. Okay, brilliant. Sorry. Great. Rob, go on.
Okay, thanks, Sam. My question, firstly, on the ground-mounted arrays, there is another alternative, and it depends on what you're going to use the caravan parking area for. But you could install solar canopies if you were keeping the caravan storage. And I know that Matt was saying you've got plenty of roof space anyhow, but if you wanted more space, then you could do a solar canopy, like in a car park. You've got the panels raised off the ground, and they double up as a canopy. The other thing is, I was wondering about what plant power using plant you're going to use on the farm. You know, are you going to be using tractors? And would you be using electric tractors, or are there hydrogen powered tractors, or you're going to use diesel powered tractors, if you're going to use tractors or any other kind of equipment like that? Because if you've got a surplus solar, it might be a bit off-piste here in some ways, but you can get electrolyzers to convert electricity into hydrogen, and then you can store the hydrogen on site, and then you could use it if there was such a thing as a hydrogen-powered tractor. Now, electrolyzers are currently quite expensive, so this might be a daft idea, but I'm just throwing it in the mix as another way of storing electricity and using it when you want it rather than when it's available.
Great, thanks, Rob. Matt, did you want to make any comments? Did you want me to?
Yeah, I think you should go on the plant, because yeah.
I mean,
what tractors are you going to have?
Yeah, we are going to be using tractors. We've had to use tractors to sow the green manure that we've sown. That's the first thing we've done, and the neighbours have done it for us because we haven't got the tractors over here. But just hearing you say all of that, I would be really interested in us looking more into that, into other ways of powering the equipment that we do need to use. And in terms of the caravan part, the caravan bit, not the park, caravan storage, for what we would like to do in the future is think of other ways. So for now, we're keeping it as caravan storage, but in the future, sort of looking at other ways that are more in line with what we do, or combining. So it could combine a lovely way with the farmers market, for example, under solar canopy. I'm a little bit aware of time. One thing I was going to say, I will say, this is all being recorded and we can send this out because we'll have all your emails from you registering, and we can send out Matt's slides as well. If we just have a quick, Ben, can I go to Neil first, because I think he had his hand up for ages and I didn't actually see it. So if Neil, if you have a question, and then Ben.
Yeah, I just wondered, the payback period now, given that there are no FIT payments, how does that affect the project? Obviously, it's less money coming in, but what sort of payback period is there now?
Oh yeah, go on. I'll try and answer. I'm just trying to answer a few of the questions in the chat as well. So I think payback periods are really insanely difficult to calculate at the moment, just because no one can really tell you whether energy prices are going to be back down to 14 pence or 50 pence next year. So all you're getting really is a sort of best guess. So previously there were the figures people tended to look at were sort of 17 to 21 years for within the Northwest. There were then people saying that had been reduced to 4 years because of the shooting up of the price of energy. So as I say, we're really hedging when it comes to this as an investment. I mean, certainly it is going to pay itself off financially within the lifetime of the panels, and it will pay itself off from a carbon point of view much more rapidly than that. So probably is less than 18 months. So but yeah, it's very difficult to put a figure on that without I'm just wild guessing really.
Just a quick thing to say, actually, in terms of, it's quite interesting with some of the other, so with the biodiversity session, we've talked about having with the members, people who have invested already in Kindling Farm, we're sort of setting up working groups to discuss some of these issues and do a bit of research and maybe do a bit of recommendations. And we had sort of talked about whether the renewable energy group might be a bit far in the future, but from all these conversations that I'm just seeing happening in the chat as well, I'm wondering whether it might be good to set one up to just kind of get these discussions happening. I'm gonna do a little shameless plug for the community shares offer, put that in the chat. So if you aren't already an investor and would love to be part of it, which we would love you to be, please do have a look at our share offer there and do spread the word and get involved in that. And then I'm going to hand over to Ben. Have you got a question, Ben?
Yes, was just putting on my tea.
Cool, yeah.
I actually have two questions now because that last one's inspired a second, if I may. Firstly, what's the longevity of the sort of solar panels that are generally available right now? 17 years seems a reasonably long time. And secondly, are there other things that we should be looking at given the amount of land we have available, such as ground source heat pumps, in order to get some of the key things that we're going to need for the farm. Just heating that farmhouse is going to be a significant part of the bill. Should we be looking at those rather than electrical heating first? Any thoughts on those, Matt?
Yeah, so so hang on, there were two questions there, Ben, and I've been thinking about the second one, so I've forgotten the first. Go on, give me that one again very quickly. Just one word.
Sorry, it's me being cheeky and asking too. What's the longevity of the sort of solar panels you can buy at the moment? If we buy them and we pop them up, there's a 17-year potential payback period. Are they still going to be good for 30 years? What, we have any
absolutely
idea?
Yeah, so 30 years is, so it used to be that you'd get a 20 or a 25-year warranty on a solar panel, and that's now many manufacturers are offering you a 30-year warranty, but also that's to be, you know, still producing to a certain level of their maximum output, so, you know, perhaps 85 or 90% of their original output. So yeah, there is, you know, there is no reason that the panels that you put on your roof shouldn't still be generating free power for, you know, in 40 years time. So yeah, even with a 17-year payback, you're still looking at, you know, at double that, you know, at that again in free energy. Oh, and the second question, which was around ground source heat pumps. Yeah, I think ground source heat pump would make a lot of sense for the farm, as there is space available for using that. You'd still need power, obviously, to sort of run those coils. So again, good to but, you know, probably more efficient than an air source heat pump.
Matt, sorry, we're running slightly over. Are you all right with that? There's just loads of good questions coming in.
I'm fine. I ran over. I'm really sorry for that. I didn't have an eye on the time.
Fine.
I told you not to let me go on, but I'm terrible.
There was a question here, I don't know if you saw it, about how does being in a valley affect cost effectiveness, and can this be calculated? Oh, I've just lost it now. Can this be calculated using something or other?
Yeah, there is
easy PV site.
Easy PV. There is a like a gradient tool on there. So you could, which I haven't played with, but could be used for that. My memory of the visit was that it was pretty flat out there.
It is for us, but possibly not for other people.
Sorry, yeah, of course.
That's
yeah,
right.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely something to consider. Not something I've played with, but definitely would recommend, you know, getting in. One thing about Easy PV is that they run periodic free online courses for installers, but I know many people who've gone on it as not installers and have not been thrown off. So it's a good space to ask questions about the most efficient use.
Matt, before we take any more, I think she's just gone. I was just going to say a few people will have to go because we did promise to finish at 8. So just wanted to say before if any of you do need to go, just a huge thank you for coming along to this, and yeah, just showing your support generally. And get in touch. What we'll do, because Matt said he'll send us the slides, which will have some of the links on, and I will also save the chat. I need to work out how to do that before I shut, and then we can send that out to you because we've got all of your email addresses and stuff. So yeah, just a really big thank you, and a huge thank you to Matt. That was really interesting. I think we're going to try and suck you into the renewable energy group, Matt, that's sure. But yeah, if anyone's got any sort of last burning questions, or I did see one in the chat that we didn't ask that was about, do the costs and ROI include inverter replacements, as for experience of an older system they were very much earlier? Did you see that one? Did you answer that?
I just answered that in the chat, which is yeah,
amazing.
the return on investment usually includes a inverter replacement at about 10 years. But yeah, they are getting better, but yeah, they won't last as long as your panels.
Are there any other last burning questions before we let Matt go and have his tea? Let you all go and have your tea. I'm going to go and have my tea. Any other questions or comments? And do if you've seen this and if you're a member and are interested in being involved in the group, do feel free to email me on helen@kindling.org.uk. Thanks, Luke. And yeah, and I thought, yeah, just do get in touch. And a huge thank you to everyone. I'm very excited about looking at all these different heated polytunnels. I was thinking compost heated polytunnels, by the way, as well. But anyway, maybe that's
yeah.
And there was also a question. I did see a question in there about anaerobic digester, which we haven't looked at doing that on the farm actually. We were involved in one with Fairfield Environment Services, Fairfield Recycling. We haven't looked at that, but yeah, all to be discussed.
Absolutely.
So thank you all, thank you, Matt, and I think we will wish you all good night and a happy dinner to you all.
Thanks for having me. Very exciting.
Yeah, great. It is great. Right, I will leave you all to sign off so that I don't lose all the stuff. So I don't lose the chat box. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for all your great questions, everyone. Sorry for going on.
You didn't. You were great. You were great. Now, let's see how to save chat.
I actually want to watch you try and figure out how to save the
Oh
chat.
my God, I know. I've done it before. It's making me read. Oh, hang on. It's down here, is it? Oh, save chat. Look at that. Done it. Right. Good. That was exciting. Lots more to talk about and do.
We always do. Good ideas always trigger better ideas.
It's good.
Wonderful.
Right.
Thank you, Helen.
No,
Good
thank
evening.
you. Yeah, and you. And I will see you soon, hopefully.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop the recording.